fake-branded fashion in Europe. And the key word is fake. So what is fake? Fake is something which doesn't have authenticity, which is unauthentic. And the main difference between the original and fake is that legitimacy. The legitimacy of a product is determined by the government in which it operates, which is actually based on the laws. So these counterfeited products are there in many forms, like there is counterfeited documents which are forged, and there is money, and pharmaceutical industry, technological industry, and many more industries. But we are going to concentrate in the counterfeited consumer goods. So according to the definition, counterfeited consumer goods are goods which infringe the property of right of trademark. Actually, the trademark holder has some right over the trademark, which is actually infringed in these aspects. And actually, they should not produce something which is identical to the trademark or which has something identification which is actually similar to the feature of the product. And according to the Counterfeit Intelligence Group of International Chamber of Commerce, there is actually the market size of the brand fake branded goods is $50 billion as of 2007, and in India also is actually flourishing in a big way. The growth percentage is 40 to 45%, and according to the Associated Chamber of Commerce, the market size is 5,600 crore by 2016. So this is the situation as of in India and world, and China is actually the leader in this counterfeited goods. So we are going to see the context. Context as of now is actually we are seeing the Istanbul Romanian market, where actually Istanbul is the exporter or the supplier of these counterfeit goods, and Romania is the consumer of these counterfeit goods. So why we are saying specifically Istanbul is there is specific reason. So when we consider the initial stages, actually these branded goods, how they are actually functioning is, these branded companies, when they actually design the product, they will take the designing, marketing, branding, these important value-added aspects in their own shelter, and they will actually outsource these cheap manufacturing process to underdeveloped and developing countries. So Istanbul is an easy target for them because there are many reasons. And Istanbul has cheap labor, and they have actually large cultivation of cotton, and actually Turkey is actually in between Europe and Asia, so the export is easier. And also there are many ports around Turkey, so it is easier to export to European countries. So these are the reasons why they prefer Istanbul. And when we consider, so this subcontracting started in this way only. So how this subcontracting works is, when these foreign branded companies supply to these companies in Istanbul, they manufacture these products and then export. But sometimes what happens is there are excess goods available in the supplier side. And also this industry actually flourished in a big way. They started exporting to America, and the exports of this country actually increased in such a way that it has become one of the top 10 exporters of the world, and especially 4th largest producer of clothing industry. So it was growing at such a faster rate. So when this was happening, as I told before, there was excess in the cloths that was manufactured, and also there were some defective clothes which had minute defects. And when they tried to sell these excess and defective products in the local industry, local market, they found that there is a great demand for these products. So when they found this, actually they started manufacturing the similar clothes with similar garments with similar quality, but without informing the brand as such. So it was started as a counterfeiting and illegal business. And as such, when it was developing, these counterfeited products were manufactured by even local manufacturers. The entry barrier is very low. They need only labor, which was available in large quantities, and they don't need much equipments. And they actually started shops in small apartments where they can actually start as a family enterprise, or they can actually start with some few more laborers which they can train themselves. So when this was expanding, they had their own right in their way. They actually legitimate the business by way of 3 factors. They actually consider the materiality of the clothing, and they consider the morality of prices, and the social legitimacy of the products. So these are from the supplier side. When you consider the consumer side, which is Romania, there are some social norms here also. So the social norms are like mostly in Romania and many of the European countries. What they consider is actually the they value the person by means of their dress codes. So they won't consider what they do or what their education background, whichever it is. They will consider the main aspect is the clothing of their person. So when they started, so people who were actually rich, they were able to afford to the branded clothes. The people who are actually low and middle class family, they were not able to afford, and they actually prefer these fake branded clothes. And even though they know that it's fake, they still prefer that. And this was happening. And Romania also, what happened in Romania and Istanbul actually nearby. So what happened with Romanian marketers, they started crossing the boundary and they started buying from Istanbul and imported, even though it's illegal, and they were actually caught and many times raids were happening, but still the business was continuing. And the market in Romania is also in a bad situation. There was a lot of, it is mostly, the whole market is considered fake, the market is dirty, and there were corruption involved, there were mafia and crimes involved in the area. So mostly the middle class people also won't enter the area. It's only the lower class people who prefer this market. And why the marketers are actually selling the fake branded clothes and they are not selling they're not selling their own products in their own designs. Even though they are manufacturing their own designs, they are not selling in their branding, they are selling in a fake branded name. It's because actually the non-Westerners are moving towards Westernization. They were actually seeing the American countries and European countries, and they were actually trying to imitate those people. And they start, even though they know that it's fake and even though they're not able to afford, they get this small happiness in that, and they were able to show the wealth and glamour in that way. So this is what happened.
If you look at the form of the fake brand or how it is depicted, these are the qualities that make a fake brand illegal, or in the eyes of the law, these are the reasons that are given for making a brand illegal. Let's look at each of them and dissect the actual content or what they actually are. So one of the biggest misconceptions that is there is that fake brands are easy to produce. Of course, they're easy to produce because standard designs are always easy to produce. But if you look at what is happening with respect to how the author described it, in Turkey, the fake branded items are produced in the after hours, and they are produced secretively. Not only that, if you look at one of the examples that are given by the author, and where he describes about how this market actually grew. So there was always an export excess that the brands could not stop the producers from selling. This export excess, so after selling this export excess, the producers started increasing and producing more goods, more of the same without the permission of the author. And then they started producing low quality materials with the same brand, and then this was lent out to the subcontractors. This is one of the ways in which it started producing, and even in this there was a continuous fear of being sent to prison and or being caught by the law with the producers. Not only that, even when it comes to selling, so the author gives the example of hawker called Ismail, who was selling garments in Turkey, where he talks about how difficult it is to find a seller who would sell these, and how critical time is because of the competition with other hawkers. So, and he also talks about the dangers that are involved in and how these guys have to run for their life every time they see a policeman. The other thing that the author talks about is that the industry is projected as hugely profit making and some kind of a powerful mafia. But if you look at the reality, there are about 80,000. By 2005 estimates, there are about 80,000 people who actually are into this manufacturing, And while most of these are actually very small scale producers who operate with less than 9 employees. So these guys are essentially people who try to meet their ends by producing these goods. On the other hand, if you look at how the brands treat their producers, their main motive of exporting this production to Turkey is for minimizing the prices. And there is the other one is the example of a guy called Ahmed, who was a jacket designer, and in the 90s when he started off as an apprentice to his uncle, and then started producing clothes. He initially got good orders because he himself was a very good sewer, and but all of a sudden his orders started declining. He started searching for orders, and then when he could not get orders from the brands, the only thing that was left for him to do to meet his end was to do whatever order that comes to him, forget his specialty, and do it without asking any questions. So when the author describes this as, so the Ahmed designs whatever he gets without asking questions. Next day they are loaded in a truck and they're gone, and he doesn't even know where they're gone. So the author describes it that it's like a spark, and there is no trace of what has happened. The other thing that is talked about is that the fakes are high priced. If you look at where these fakes are being sold, most of these fakes are sold in local markets. And on the other hand, the actual brands that we talk about that are sold at high prices, the author talks about how these are actually turned, how low quality garments are actually sold. So what happened in one of the orders, what happened was that the order size was smaller than what it was supposed to be due to miscommunication and the language problem that the Turkish had. So what was done is that this is a typical trick followed by all the producers. They steam iron the garments, make them big size, and sell it to the brands. Once they reach the European markets, the markets realize, but by the time it's all over, and the relationship between brands and the producers has been constantly shifting. So the brands also had no problem with this, because they could always find a better new producer. And such low quality products were actually sold at a high price when compared to the inauthentic products, the so-called inauthentic products which were sold to local markets at a low price. The other thing that he talks about is tarnishing the brand image. While most of his research contradicts it, what these guys try to say is that whenever they sell to someone, whenever these inauthentic goods are sold to someone, the guy who wears it tries to pass it off as original, thereby making people know that he now owns a branded clothing, and the others who look at it try to be inspired by this and start to buy the products of the original brand if they can afford to. The other thing that the author talks about is the clothes being affordable. So the entire world is filled with invitations by coveted brands to buy their clothes, which are not in the reach of most people. So these small manufacturers, all the inauthentic manufacturers, try to provide the public with an option to actually wear those clothes and bring in reach the brand that they aspire for. The last and most important thing is that this is illegal. So as of now, as Ismail, the guy who I mentioned before, tries to explain in this, so the only way to differentiate between a product and its counterfeit is by law. So typically a product that is produced first is termed original, and anything that comes second is termed a counterfeit or an imitation of the existing product. So one of the examples that he states was that a customs officer tried to actually change the dates, block a shipment, change the dates on it, and make the second shipment as of a different producer as original, and the actual authentic garments were called fake. So that is how close the fake garments are, the inauthentic are to the original. So in describing this illegal activity, the author says that there has been due to people buying it, there has been a social legitimacy that got established to it. So he quotes Hussain and who calls it lore. I would quote, it's basically a legitimacy that is emerging from the conventions of normal life, a consensual construction of fairness, and a form of legitimacy that guides ways of being and acts as a source of power, enabling people to take a stance, as we have seen in the case of these fake brands. So maybe we should stop arguing on the semiotics and significance and start arguing on the materiality of these objects.
So these are some of the examples of everyday fakes. The first one is digital piracy in the form of movies or music. And here again, the quality of the music or the movies that you download online and the actual movie that you can buy as a CD or a cassette is very much comparable, or sometimes it's better than the original. So again, here is an instance of fakeness or inauthenticity being fixed not on the quality of the object but on the source from where it comes. And recently, the lobbies of the record companies, they managed to get a law passed by the US Congress saying Stop Online Piracy Act, or the SOPA. And in protest to this, the Pirate Bay, they came out with a statement. And this had a few very interesting points. One of these was that in the early 20th century, Thomas Alva Edison, he patented the CinemaScope, or he had all rights of all the moving technology in movies. And this was valid only in the east coast of America. So what the companies, the Disneys and the Paramounts of the world, they did was that they moved to the west coast, they moved to Los Angeles in California, and they set up Hollywood there. And then they based their early movies on fairy tales of the Grimm brothers and other folk tales, and these became hits. And when they became a big brand, they started copyrighting this. And that's how the whole concept of authenticity in movies and music came about. Another is the Cyanogen mod for Android phones. Here there is no profit motive because both Cyanogen and Android are free. But again, and often Cyanogen is an improvement of the Android model. But still, if you use a Cyanogen, then your phone's warranty is void and you can't take it to a claim, you can't claim a warranty on it. So here also, though it's of a better quality, it's considered to be fake because it does not come from the original equipment manufacturer. Another interesting case is that of Monsanto. It's an American seed company. What they did was they patented seeds and then they signed contracts with farmers who wanted to use these seeds. And according to them, the farmers cannot reuse these seeds next year. So even if they cultivated a plant and the plant bore fruit, but next year they can't use the seed that they got from the same fruit because they haven't signed a contract with Monsanto for the same. So this is another example of everyday fake that we can see. Another example close to the managerial domain would be sometimes people go for an MBA not because they want the skill set come with an MBA, but often they want the brand image that comes with the top tier MBA college. So recently I was talking to a friend of mine, his ambition was to become a stand-up comedian, and this year he ended in the IIM Ahmedabad. So I asked him, if you are to become a stand-up comedian, why do you want to go to IMA? Then he said, a stand-up comedian who studied in IMA is better than a stand-up comedian who didn't study in IMA. So here again, there is no tangible benefit that you get from the authenticity, but it's rather an intangible thing. And it's the brand value that you pay for, rather than the quality at times. So when you come to the laws governing the intellectual property rights, you can see that it started in 15th century in Italy, and later when the Americans executed it, they knew that this was going to cause problems in the form. Their original intention was to promote scientific innovation and research, as in that providing people with an incentive to go forward and research. But they also knew that this would cause other people to turn back from research because they could not use the copyrighted content for their research. But they did a cost-benefit analysis and they found that the cost was less than the benefit, and so they could still go ahead with the law. But what happens nowadays is that people do sort of a lottery on patents. So when they find a new technology, they then block all closely related technologies in the hope that at least one of these 15-20 patents will go on to become a big hit. And so it's worth paying for the 19 others so that you can hold a patent to one of these. And this is the grey area of legality in authentic and inauthentic materials.
So, with brand beings of by producing even after producing products of comparable quality, we do not have so the price charged by brands is much more exorbitant than the price with the so-called inauthentic brands. And why is this not illicit when the motive of this is just profit? This is the reason we came up with this hypothesis. The law is just a subjective interpretation of morality while powerful, and is not as supreme as it is touted